Hey, this might not come as a big surprise to you, but 2022 had a lot of open world games, so we collected a list of 10 of the ones that we thought were the best. We got a lot of suggestions, but of course there are plenty more, so we're looking forward to hearing your own top 5 or your own top 10 in the comments, but let's get started with ours and talk about number 10, V Rising. This one is kind of like a damn near perfect vampire simulator. You wake up from a deep, centuries-long slumber, and your goal is just to rebuild your castle and take your power back. V Rising is a bunch of things. It's part open world, part survival, part top-down adventure game, and the open world is pretty vast and has a decent amount of different biomes. Lush countrysides, spooky forests, snow-covered mountains, dark caverns. You get around here. And there's a day and night cycle, but seeing that you're a vampire and can't really deal with the sun, it forces you to plan things out a little bit. So at night, you should be out in full force, raiding human settlements and collecting resources, and during the day, you should be holed up in the fortress, building it and crafting and stuff. There's also a cool multiplayer element to it also, where you can work together with other players or see them as direct competition. So if you want to be the #1 vampire lord of the land, you can raid their castles to really beef up your own. We've been on record with this. I think most of us here at gameranx are pretty big fans of vampires, so V Rising is just a very good vampire game that lets you really live out that vampire power fantasy and roam around some worlds a little bit. Now next over at number 9, speaking of roaming around worlds, Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord is absolutely massive. A game that initially you might look on the surface thinking it's just one of those big medieval war simulator battle type things that your dad would play, right? Well, there's actually a lot more to it. Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord gives you tons of freedom, tons of options, how to build your army, who you are as a person building this army, and plenty of open environments and towns to explore. There's a full economy, there's relationships, all good fun open world type stuff that you would do to keep yourself busy, and then of course all the Mount and Blade stuff, the riding around on horses with pikes and killing hundreds of men and stuff. Mount and Blade 2 Bannerlord is definitely the one to surprise you. If you've always seen these games and thought, not for me, maybe a little too in-depth, maybe a little too historical, Bannerlord 2 throws a metric ton of different activities at you that might really pique your interest, so consider giving it a shot. Now, next over at number 8, we have Sonic Frontiers. This is Sonic's first real big open world game, and while it's not one full connected open world, you jump to a bunch of different little islands, but each one is kind of its own open world space with open world activities. Now, Sonic Frontiers is divisive, I'll say that. I think if you're a casual Sonic fan, it seems kind of rough and buggy, and if you're a hardcore Sonic fan, you're probably a little bit more happy with it, just because, in my opinion, they really figured out how Sonic moves and fights in an open world, and ultimately, they really just figured out what Sonic would do in an open world, and honestly, what it is run really fast. The game worlds are populated with all these very quick little puzzles and encounters for you to do to expand the world. The more you do, the more of these little things that you accomplish, the easier it is to get around the world, because as you do this, boost pads, launch pads, grind rails will pop up in the environment, meaning you can get back to where you came from much faster now because there's a grind rail there, stuff like that. It's essentially Death Stranding, but you're not building with an online community and saving the world. You're just Sonic and you're getting more grind rails. But yes, to me, that means Sonic Frontiers counts as a Strand type game. Either way, I think it's a ton of fun. It is flawed, it is buggy. I think Sonic still could have used a little bit more time and love in the oven, but it's decent. So maybe check it out. Now, next over at number 7, we have LEGO Star Wars The Skywalker Saga. They went absolutely bananas on this game. You essentially have an open world explorable environment with every planet, with almost every moment in the movies. Like when Luke goes out to get some power converters from Tashi Station, you then have a whole open world Tatooine environment to explore. Then the first time Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon get to feed the city of Naboo, you're able to explore it, and it is massive and gorgeous. Open snow Hoth environments, the new planets from the newer movies, basically everything is here, and it's massive. Is the stuff you do in the world super exciting? No, the side quests feel more like busy work, but they're filled with fun little Easter eggs and goofy dialogue lines that they're still worth experiencing, and especially if you're a younger player, this is going to give you so much to do. But the fact that this game ambitiously not only included every mainline Star Wars film, but also decided to give them a bunch of huge open worlds to run around in or use vehicles in is pretty cool. We really respect it, and we had a lot of fun with this one, so check it out. Next at number 6, we have Need for Speed Unbound, which is a newer release, but people are really digging it. We did a before you buy for it, and it's a pretty solid Need for Speed game. It's similar to Heat, if you played Heat, in terms of it being an open world and structured around kind of like a day and night cycle around racing and running from the cops and building up heat. And this one is in an open world Chicago style environment that is really stunning looking. Now the game has kind of changed up the art style with characters looking a little bit more animated, with tons of like animated effects and like weird almost hand-drawn doodle style smoke coming from your tires and stuff like that. But ultimately you're in a heightened cartoony stylized world where the actual world itself just looks pretty realistic. Shiny rain-soaked streets, beautiful sunsets, all that racing stuff is really good here, and Need for Speed Unbound is kind of underrated right now. They kind of just released it, but it's a pretty cool open world racer. Next, over at number 5, you ever get sick of city life and want to move out to the country and buy a farm and fill it with slime? Yeah, well, that's Slime Rancher 2. Yes, first off, the game is technically in early access, so maybe we end up talking about it on a list in 2023 as well, but who knows. But if you're familiar with the first game, you know exactly what is going on here. It's cool. You run around this very fun, vibrant world, catching slimes to bring back to your farm to make a profit, and yeah, that's it. In its current state, it is technically missing a lot of features, and you can see everything in the game within apparently like a dozen hours or so, but it being in early access means that there is a lot more stuff probably coming soon. So that would obviously mean more slimes, more areas, bigger areas, more ways to profit. But either way, when we came up with this list, we immediately thought about this because we had fun with the early access stuff. Exploring this world can be a blast and be oddly relaxing and overall just a good time. Next, over at number 4, we have GhostWire Tokyo. Now in this, you're exploring a pretty accurate looking Tokyo. It's wide open, but it is totally empty, devoid of people, which is pretty spooky considering how hustling and bustling Tokyo usually is. Now it's been overrun with ghostly forces and no one is around, so it's just you exploring this empty, haunted Tokyo, finding side quests, and fighting off ghosts. The combat here is actually pretty interesting. You're not running around with a gun with a first-person shooter. It's actually finger guns. You're doing all kinds of magic Doctor Strange stuff. And while ultimately it ends up being pretty simple, it feels good. Now, it's not a perfect game. Sometimes you might argue that the open world works against itself with how awkwardly you gotta get on rooftops, and how the game can kind of become like a glorified collectathon, but if you look at it in another way, where it's kind of like a Yakuza game, but in first person with ghosts, where you just kind of walk around and find strange side quests in a weird Japanese city, that's probably the best sales pitch I can give it, man. GhostWire Tokyo is definitely unique, that's for sure. But now down at number 3, we have Dying Light 2. Yes, this released earlier in the year, and we're still thinking about it. It takes place about 20 years after the first game, and the world has kind of adapted to the state that it was in. Like most folks have taken to living on rooftops that are filled with trees and vegetation, and interiors are filled with hibernating zombies during the day that will flood the streets and become less docile at night. But what's really cool about this world is that your choices sometimes have somewhat of a direct effect on it. You know, maybe not to the extent that we thought when the game was being previewed, but still, you can give power to certain factions in certain districts which will benefit you in different ways. Like one faction might place jump pads or extra ways to get around parkouring faster, while embracing another group might place more traps and weapons and defenses against zombies around. The open world you're parkouring around in is just so much fun to explore, just like it was in the previous entry, and the combat, of course, still boils down to drop kicking people off of roofs. It's still the most satisfying. It's really cool. Ultimately, Dying Light 2, I don't know if it's going to be as memorable as the first one, but it's still a solid open world adventure. If you like free running, parkouring stuff, if you like first person games, if you like killing zombies, I think it's a pretty easy sell. Now down to number 2, we have Horizon Forbidden West, which is the bigger, better, and more beautiful version of Horizon Zero Dawn. And I mean all of that literally, with no disrespect to Zero Dawn, but Forbidden West really does take everything from the first game and cranks it up to 11, starting with the world. I mean, not only is it a technically marvel and a really good looker, but it's also filled with stuff to do. Guerrilla Games took an almost Witcher 3-like approach to the side quests here. You know, they're longer, they're more fleshed out, they're a little bit more interesting, and there's a lot more optional stuff in this game that is really compelling and feels a little bit better than just go here, do this. The world is fun to explore, it's very enticing, and it is very easy to immediately stumble off the main path and get distracted. You know, whether it is a side quest or seeing something from the old world off in the distance that you want to go climb up, or seeing a tall neck that you need to climb, or a machine that you need a part from, it's very easy to get lost in this world, and Guerrilla did a really good job of making it feel post-apocalyptic, but also reclaimed and lived in by these new people. Say what you want about the game, but it is definitely one of the more impressive open worlds of 2022. But now down to number 1, the big kahuna itself, Elden Ring. I mean, at this point, I'm sure most of us are the most familiar with this one. You get your classic, difficult, FromSoft, Dark Souls combat, but in a big open world you might find in a more traditional RPG. From giant landscapes to tight and difficult dungeons, Elden Ring really has it all. Like, I know that sounds kind of like I'm overdoing it, but yeah, like it is a world that is filled with weapons and armor and items to find, but also invisible walls to break and tons of secrets that really make the exploration just that rewarding. But while you're riding around on a horse in an open world, they still manage to even squeeze in some small Dark Souls-like areas as well, which is awesome. The lands between is almost like a big giant hub world that's playing host to all of this stuff to explore. It's also visually stunning, from the more green open areas of Limgrave to the dead and creepy Caelid. Each part of this world is super unique in its own way, and not just visually. Each area is home to their own enemy types and just weird mysteries. Now, after talking about this, I want to go play Elden Ring again. We also got some bonus games we wanted to mention because we couldn't fit just 10. The first is Choo Choo Charles, a very weird but very inspired haunted train game where you ride around avoiding a spooky train while building up your own train, and it involves hopping off of your train and going out into an open world for resources. Then, of course, the absolutely massive Xenoblade Chronicles 3, which is awesome. Monolith Soft once again knocked it out of the park. Of course, God of War Ragnarok, which we didn't include on the main list because it's a little bit more broken up than a traditional open world, but some people might argue for it, so yeah. And also, it's worth giving Spidey some love, since technically Marvel's Spider-Man Remastered and Miles Morales both got PC releases this year, so yeah. But those are some of the big open world games we wanted to give a shout out for 2022, the ones that kept us busy, the ones that kept us entertained. So we want to hear from you guys in the comments what your personal choices are. If maybe we recommended a new game for you here today or something like that, if we helped you out at all, clicking the like button's all you gotta do to help us. We would very much appreciate that. But as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.